prosecutors are, in some cases, withholding evidence that could prove somebody's innocent. In some cases, they are not turning over evidence in a timely fashion. So, waiting until the last minute. There are less serious types of misconduct. For instance, in closing arguments or opening arguments, a prosecutor might cross the line, and an appellate court might decide that what the prosecutor said influenced the jury so much that it requires a new trial. So there are many different types of misconduct, and withholding evidence, or in one case, we found manufacturing evidence is certainly the most egregious. So we reviewed hundreds of cases in which a defendant alleged that prosecutors had committed misconduct, and they were asking an appellate court for either a new trial or for their conviction to be vacated. And in at least 11 cases, those defendants ultimately were exonerated and had spent collectively more than 100 years in prison. So there's a real impact here. There's also a lack of accountability. So there were 120 cases where the appellate court threw out the conviction because of a prosecutor's conduct, but there were only a few cases in which a prosecutor was disciplined. At least 7 of the prosecutors who had cases thrown out due to their misconduct went on to hold higher posts, such as a judge or a district attorney. So there is in Massachusetts and in other states, there are authorities. The Board of Bar Overseers is what it's called in Massachusetts, but they are essentially what is supposed to happen in many cases is a judge might refer a prosecutor to the Board of Bar Overseers, saying this misconduct is egregious. You need to investigate. But we only found 2 public reprimands for professional misconduct in 42 years. So this isn't happening. And I know from my work on harmful error, which was in 2003, it was a short book about prosecutorial misconduct around the country, a nationwide investigation. That's not just Massachusetts; it's all around the country. It is a self regulating office. So the entities meant to discipline prosecutors are rarely doing so. Prosecutors arguably hold more power than any position. They wield the power of life and death, right, in some states. And there really is nobody, other than myself and my colleagues and other journalists around the country, there isn't anyone watching this. And it's also difficult to get the documents themselves. So it's difficult for investigative reporters to follow and watch for prosecutorial misconduct because of the sorry state of public records laws around the country. After Hurricane Katrina, the Danziger, you all might have heard about the Danziger bridge incident. Police officers shot and killed and wounded civilians, unarmed civilians, on a bridge after Hurricane Katrina. And the prosecutors who handled the case against the police officers, some of them went online to the Times-Picayune, their local newspaper's website, and posted comments like "guilty, guilty," and here's why. And this was severe misconduct. This was during the trial. This was when the prosecutors were not supposed to be writing about the case publicly, and they were doing so using pseudonyms, and it turns out that they had done that before that same judge, the same type of misconduct. And so you can see how if people are watching, and if there were a way for journalists to say, well, let me look up these prosecutors and see if they have a history of misconduct, things could change. The judge knew, and ultimately he reversed the convictions of all of the police officers. And he said in his opinion, these same prosecutors have done this before. So what we also found is prosecutors themselves can be repeat offenders, right? They just keep doing it. And the judges, for decades here in Massachusetts, they've been pointing to misconduct. They've said, quote, case after case. They've called it a rash, They've, the quote after, this is a judge saying, after nearly 2 decades of seeing the same transgressions continuously occurring, the judge was, quote, beginning to have genuine doubts about the motives of assistant district attorneys. Quote, our profession and society deserve much better from public prosecutors. That said, these same judges aren't putting the names of the prosecutors in their opinions. So if a journalist, an activist, a defense attorney were to read this opinion in which a judge is throwing out a conviction, they actually redact the name of the prosecutor. And you have to do a lot of work just to find that.
This particular subject I don't know too much about. I only know that I know that in Florida, where I am living currently, I haven't heard anything about this specific issue. But my father, who is a judge now, but he was a defense attorney. He worked for the public defender's office down in West Palm Beach, Florida, for many, many years. He was also in a private practice for many, many years. He essentially said that you have bad eggs in every profession, and law was included in that estimation. I have no doubt that not a lot of action was taken against those prosecutors because, unfortunately, and I've said this for many, many years, the justice system in this country is very flawed, very corrupt. It's horrible. It's awful. And, it's no wonder that there are so many people that do not trust their local administration or even the presidential administrations, because none of them seem to know just how the hell to solve the problem. And please, pardon my language. But that's essentially where we're at. No one seems to know how to solve the problem because no one wants to look at the bigger picture. Nobody wants to look at themselves and go, oh crap, maybe I'm part of the problem. But again, it unfortunately you run into corruption, and not necessarily corruption, but you run into misconduct in every profession. It's not just prosecutors. It's also defense attorneys. My dad has said that they have been known to basically withhold things from a trial in order to win a case. He has never done that, thank God. But he has heard of people who have, and fortunately, karma always wins in the end. So, there is a bit of a silver lining here, because although they might get away with it for a little while, there is someone who is going to eventually notice, and that person is possibly going to look into this and go, wait a second, something's not right here. And then they're going to confront that specific individual, and essentially that individual is going to have to answer for what they did. It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but sometime down the road it will happen. A broken system it may be, a corrupt system it may be, but it is a system. And, there is a silver lining to all of this. Okay. I'm going to jump off of here, and just thought I'd throw my 2 cents in. Anyway, this is Robbie91, signing off. Have a good night, everybody. Sweet dreams.
Well, absolutely, prosecutors should be held accountable. But let me tell you who else should be held accountable. The news media. When they report things in an opinionated way, and they leave out facts of a story, and they edit people's words, and they misquote people, and as a result of that, you have a divided country like it's never been divided before. The news media should absolutely be held accountable, jailed, and deemed an enemy of the state, because essentially that's what's going on. Laugh at me if you will, but right now the only ones laughing is Russia, because they're watching us totally destroy ourselves, and they don't even have to load a gun, thanks to the media wanting to fulfill the 24-hour news cycle with crap, wanting to fill the 24-hour news cycle to keep people tuned in, keep people in an uproar. That's what it's about. They're making money, wreaking havoc. Ratings are coming in, papers are being sold, magazines are being sold, subscriptions to news articles on the internet are being sold. Why? Because there's not one newscast anymore that's not opinionated. The news, I won't call them journalists. People on TV acting as journalists put their own opinion and political views and spin this, and it has caused a great divide. They're also responsible for the race relations never being able to be put to rest. It's awful funny how if it's a white on black crime, it's made national news in a matter of minutes. If it's a black on black crime, nothing. If it's a black on white crime, nothing. It's literally a blurb, literally a mention, and that is it. The only thing that makes news is white on black, and it's blown out of proportion to the height of rioting, and the news media is feeding this. I have to tell you, if somebody blew up every news media outlet main building, I wouldn't shed a tear. In fact, I would totally understand it. You all should be ashamed of yourselves. And if you just happen to be one of the very few that's not guilty of this, well, you're guilty by association. Sorry, but it is what it is. More and more of our society is looking at news journalists as the scum of the earth. It used to be a time when there was a saying, get it first get it right. I don't think many of the journalists have even ever heard of this, and they surely do not practice it. But it's what we're dealing with. We don't have to worry about outside enemies. We're destroying ourselves, and the news media is the catalyst.
Any murderers out there who have not cooperated with the police and not telling the loved ones who they have murdered should not be released. If they're not willing to give any information on where the body is, whether the body is from a family member, a friend, their own relative, etc., they should be prosecuted forever. And I mean, put on a sparky electric chair and never be released. Killed outright.
Well, in my opinion, the justice system needs a lot of changes made. First, I think that they should be more concerned with getting to the truth of the matter and getting the guilty party or the innocent party treated appropriately, or sentenced or released, whatever the case may be. I think that right now the focus is winning for your client. It's not for looking for justice. All I care about is that my client wins. And that's where the misconduct would come into play. If I don't reveal this information, we can win. If I do reveal this information, we're sunk. So I'm going to keep it under wraps. And that's wrong. Whether it's the prosecutor or the defense, I think they both should be held accountable for their actions. And whether the case is tried or thrown out based on the conduct of these lawyers, they should be held accountable, totally. And I think that all evidence should be presented to both prosecution and defense so that a fair trial can be held. Lawyers have a reputation, and that reputation has come from the behavior of lawyers. There's a joke about lawyers. Well, they're the same thing, aren't they? That kind of thing. And that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? That feeling about lawyers is based on what lawyers do. The heck with whether it's right or wrong. I want to win at all cost is the way they look at it, rather than, hey, let's find out whether this person did it or not. If they did, they should be sentenced. If they didn't, let them go. It should not be for just whether we can win